I'll call the Port of Newport regular monthly commission meeting to order. First order, the commissioners have any recommended changes to the agenda? Okay.
No.
Great. Are we recording?
Yes.
Karen's is out of town today, so Becca is with us. She's got it all under control.
Thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is the first opportunity for public comment. If you'd like to make a public comment, just state your name. You have 3 minutes to do so. You'll have another chance at the end of the meeting as well. Nothing heard. We will continue on to the consent calendar. Has the commission had a chance to review the items on the consent calendar? Any reason to remove anything? Any questions?
No.
Nope. Good. Okay. That being the case, I'll take a motion to accept the items listed on the consent calendar as written.
I make a motion we accept the consent calendar as written. Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion passes. Excuse me. I think we will move into correspondence and presentations. The first item, I don't believe the individual who's making that presentation is present.
He is ill today, so he opted not to come and spread germs. So he will come at another time.
No, we appreciate that. So at this point, then, item A will be tabled until
We hear back
another
from him.
meeting. Okay. Okay. So that gets to item B on our correspondence and presentations. Sea Scout Rampart, Leon Noble, who is present here. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
There's a hole in my bucket is a children's song. I think we all know it. There's a hole in my bucket, your life is divine. It's based on a dialogue between two characters about a leaky bucket. The song describes the rotary thought process. The rotary thought process being Henry has a leaky bucket and Liza tells him to repair it. To fix the leaky bucket, he needs a straw. To cut the straw, he needs an axe. To sharpen the axe, he needs to wet the sharpening stone. To wet the stone, he needs water. To fetch water, he needs the bucket, which has a hole in it. Bringing us back to there's a hole in the bucket. We have a similar deadlock with employment characteristics. Our leaky bucket is employment. To get money, you need work. To get work, you need knowledge and skills. To get knowledge and skills, you need experience. To get experience, you need work. And there's a hole in my bucket. Here lies the devil. Some work opportunities require adding licensing, certifications, and degrees. There's some manner to those knowledge and skills and experience. Cases of employment, pesticide applicators, electricians, plumbers, truck drivers, contractors, mechanics, teachers. Others do not. Anybody can mow a lawn. Anybody can go flip a burger at McDonald's. The disconnect here is that those without skills are demanding a higher wage, and those with skills aren't getting that wage yet. Obviously, there's a pretty sharp, angry crowd in the middle of that, one argument for the other. The Sea Scout ship 5255 SSS Rampart is a program that means to fix the leaky bucket. Our goal is to provide knowledge, skills, and experience to the population. We're not just talking Sea Scouts either. We're already partnered with, of course, other Boy Scout programs. We're in talks with groups like 4-H who don't have a voting program, who aren't able to provide at any level the same kind of program that we're going to provide. They're not able to put a drill into a 14, 15, 16-year-old's hand and teach them how to use it. simple reason, and this is kind of the across-the-board reason, is insurance. We can't afford this. We can't take on liability. The problem is, over 20 years ago, when I was old enough to go get a federal work permit program going, I went and applied. That same year, I was on a golf course using power tools on my own with a minimal amount of supervision at age 14. People in my high school were placed in similar positions where they were running equipment but with minimal supervision because they were being entrusted with that and because the liability wasn't as great for some of these. Here's our problem. We need a place to do that. We need a place to put it if you're going to have a young adult. We need the capability to say, now that you've learned it, it's time to teach it, because that will reinforce that you have it. We don't have a place to do that. We don't have a place to build cabinets for a boat, or cabinets for a house, or frame dock, or work on fiberglass. We don't have a place to park a car that needs a cylinder head so that we can teach them how to work on that vehicle. We don't have a place to work on our own fleet. Right now we have a fleet of 5 boats, with a 6th one waiting for us to have a place to store it, and a 7th one that way, that's 44 feet, waiting for us to find moorage for it. I can't go down the street without being offered a free boat. The caveat is, it's not a single one of them work. One of them doesn't even float. I cut a hole in that. It had a hole in it to begin with. We need a place to work on those. The reason we're here today is because we're asking for that. What we're looking for to fulfill the goal of our program, which is vocational skills. What we're looking for is 2,000 to 4,000 square feet of indoor space, with another 1,400 to 2,000 square feet of outdoor storage space. With the exception of one boat pledged to us, all the rest are our trailers. We can move them around. Our specific request: 2,000 square feet or greater of indoor space. You'll find that on page 3 if you're looking for it. With appropriate utilities. We will need to plug in welders, we will need to plug in drills, we will need to plug in table saws and drill presses and sanding equipment so that we can teach them how to use that. Further, we can teach other people in the community, because we've already reached out beyond the scope of our program to include those who want to learn. This has become a lot bigger than the Boy Scouts of America thought it would be. It's become a lot bigger than I thought it would be, and it happened almost immediately. We have adults who want to come and learn with us. We do that. We encourage that to happen. We encourage them to come participate. We only have one captain. They have to go through the training and registration process for the Boy Scouts of America, so that we don't have adults who are preying on children in our shop space with our children. That's the only caveat. For those who are under 14 who cannot officially join the program, we've made arrangements so that we have more adult supervision. We've reduced the amount of power tools that they're able to handle as their age reduces. A Cub Scout isn't allowed to use any power tools, but a Sea Scout is, which means a Sea Scout can go and get their idea and take it to the power tool and use the power tool on their behalf, showing them how to do it, getting them ready for the next time when they are able to do that, which could be even 1 year later, 11-year-old versus 12-year-old. We're asking for this at zero cost, not because we're greedy, but because we don't have it. Right now, the definition of a Sea Scout program is an 18 to 3-year process, and we did it in 5 months. The speed at which you heard our council executive's neck snap he was expecting to hear from us in January, and here we are at the end of August with all of our paperwork in place, the fundraising done, the adults in place, these kids ready for Sea Scouts, ready to go. Everything that I've been doing has been, this needs to happen yesterday. And some people have agreed with me and some people haven't. This particular part of the equation, I've been looking for 4 months for. We're just now getting to the point where we can talk to you about it. We're up and running and active. I have very, very motivated Sea Scouts who really enjoy working on things, who want to bring their friends to come work on things. But I have no place that I can unleash them on a 28-foot carver with pitches. That is my request for today. However, we don't want to say we're doing it for free. Because of the way our program is built, because of how we are expected to progress, we actually have service built into our advancements. You can download the Sea Scout manual at seascout.org. It has every piece of information that is expected to be known. There's also a link on from there to there on our website. It has every piece of information that our Sea Scouts are expected to be known in it. Once they reach out of the 4 ranks, once they finish the first 2, the second 2 specifically say, teach. All 4 ranks say, serve. At the end of each advancement, the last paragraph is service. 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 You can do this much service. I've gotten to the point in my life where I don't count how much service I've done because I grew up as a scout, and that was what was required of me. Somebody else counted it for me. I'm hoping to be in a position where I'm going to have to count for them. That service, specifically for the port, needs manpower. You have a park bench to put in. You need something refinished. We can go get that, do the work, put it back in place. It needs to go dig up some riprap, put some riprap in because you've got a permit for it and you don't have enough manpower time to do it. Great, let's go do that. Because it's going to come up, we have insurance coverage on every single person that participates in our program. The unit is covered by, the Sea Scouts in the unit are covered by the Boy Scouts of America. The boats are covered by boat insurance. And the charter organization, which owns the unit, has to maintain insurance as well. Surely one of those 3 will take care of the port. In fact, I know the Boy Scouts will, simply because they've done it already this year. As for cost, like I said, we don't have a budget for it at this point. We don't have a budget for anything. We don't have a budget to fix the twin 305s in the Carver. What we do have is a very aggressive fundraising plan that will put us in a position for next year to be able to pay for this facility. So the first year, we want to pay for it with in-kind service. And next year, we want to revisit it with a full-on lease program. I understand that there's some work that needs to be done. We have been forwarded some information that we will attempt to chase down from the county in the form of grants that would help us get to a point where that facility is then usable. The facility that we're talking about, which we've already been talking about the possibility of using this, is the Equina processors over here. Can we still yeah. But it needs some work and before they'll let us use it, obviously. We want to help with that. We will do whatever we can to make that happen.
We'll put a picture, excuse me, Leon, we'll put a picture up of the facility just for context for the commissioners.
Okay.
You can keep talking.
I happened to, I happened to swing through there when the gate was open, and
Sorry about this building right here.
that building right there.
And this is no
Like I said, we have a few boats that need to be sorted. That could happen anytime. On that note, I can sit here and talk forever and a day. What do you need to know from me?
Well, let's get that. Does staff have anything else to add to what we have? And thank you, Leon. Does staff have anything else to add to this in terms for the commission before we start chatting more about it?
Just at the places, and for the public, there were some extra copies. There is a letter of support from the superintendent, Karen Gray of Lincoln County Schools, and I just wanted you all to see that. In addition, Erin has done some research on costs associated with sort of bare minimum bringing the facility to a place where we have reliable electricity, good lighting, and doors that close and things like that. So that facility, it's not really in rentable condition right now. I think we could agree without these improvements, and so those improvements Erin has done some research on, and we have been communicating just this week about the potential of finding a grant through Lincoln County to cover the cost of that. There's no guarantee that that will happen, but we're going to try and pursue that in a collaboration. And the cost is roughly...
It's about $12,000. What it needs is on this, so it's about 1,200 square foot building. There's a barn door basically on the southern side, and then over here on the northwestern side there's another barn door, along with what should be an exterior opening door, but the ones on the western side are non-existent. There's no doors on that side, and then the barn door that's on the southern side is it needs to be fixed. So does the wall. There's also a couple. There's a place where in between the door that opens to the exterior and then what would be the sliding door on the western side, there's a short section of wall. It's probably about, 2 studs or so, maybe 3 studs that have been knocked off of the foundation because of forklifts hit it at some point in time or something like that. And there's some roof repairs that need to be done to it. The electrical on the inside is in pretty bad shape. It's all heavily corroded because there's been no protection from the outside. Basically those open doors, and then plus what was in it previously was corrosive. So all the 110 needs to be repaired and rerun. But all of this stuff needs to be done at the building, regardless. It's things that have to get into that building to make it habitable by somebody. But it's right around $12,000. So at bare minimum.
That would be all subcontracted, or is that labor for the port as well?
Those are quotes that I got a few months back on, from contractors on doors, roofing, and electrical. Especially the electrical, we really, the roof repair could possibly, even that right there is stuff that should be contracted. So.
Anything else from staff at this point? So, commissioners, anybody have thoughts, comments, and concerns? And again, to summarize this, basically what What you're looking for is the use of the facility, at least initially for a 12-month period, at no cost in exchange for helping to improve, make the repairs wherever possible to the facility and any other types of repairs that your group could do for the port in the meantime, and then we'd reevaluate in 12 months. Does that about sum up?
That sounds about right. Yes.
Okay. Anybody? Yeah, Jim.
Sure, I do. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for your service. I like the Sea Scouts. I think it's a great thing. There was a Sea Scout program here in the late 90s, and I know it dissolved. Can you give me a little bit of a lowdown of the history of what that looked like and what happened to the assets when that program dissolved? Do you know much about that?
I can tell you exactly what happened to
Okay.
the assets. I know nothing. Here's how it works. You know how McDonald's works, right?
More or less.
You have a guy who contacts them, who goes through some training, and then basically buys the name.
Okay.
That's also how every Boy Scout unit is. The Boy Scouts of America unit is. You have a group of people, 5 adults, who get 5 kids, who then go and for $40 a year. For the charter. Oh, for the charter, yeah. For $40 a year, you're chartering the name. You're getting the name of that unit. That covers the paperwork and the program. Because now you have access to the books and the training and all of that stuff and the name. But those people own the unit, and the unit does not actually exist in a legal standing. So what happened in the 90s is that I believe it was the American Legion had a Sea Scout program, and all of those assets belonged to the American Legion. So when the organization folded, and the unit folded, because of whatever reason, I hear it's because the skipper moved, and they couldn't find a replacement for the skipper. All of those assets then go back to the charter organization, and they do whatever they want with them.
I guess my follow-up to that, or where I was going with that, is say this dissolves for some reason, not questioning your commitment at all, but we might be sitting on 7 derelict vessels.
No, you won't.
Then, like, where does that recovery come from, or
Our plan for our vessels is not to ever call them derelict, because they're not. They have engines that don't run,
okay.
and one doesn't float. And one is owned by the council, so that one can go back to the council whenever they want to.
Okay.
We're discussing how they want to go about doing things, but the council, if they relinquish ownership for the sake of giving it in our name and giving us to license it and all of that wonderful stuff, we consider that a council vote, and because we're trustworthy, we get back to the council. That's as simple as it gets. We have other Sea Scout programs in the area. There's one in Eugene, and there are 7 units in Portland. We are not resting it by any means.
So they would assume assets if something happened here.
It would
didn't
be basically a buyout or donation.
Okay.
But we are not going to have that problem. And the reason I say that is because we started with 7 and we're at 10. And the more that we are able to say, look what we're doing now, the more to come in and do this. I don't have Sea Scouts who are saying, I might show up. I have Sea Scouts going, when can I work on this thing? When can I come do this? When can I go do that? What would you like me to do next? Where's my advancement looking? What can I look at in the future? I have one Sea Scout right now who did a ham radio thing for Jamboree on the Air, and he's immediately rolled into amateur radio classes with his father. He and his father have both jumped into lifeguard training classes. I'm not going to see them on the next meeting because they're going to be in the middle of getting a lifeguard training thing, and I'm going, okay, go. I'm looking to find a BSA trainer to go sit in on the class and mark off things that need to be marked off so that it counts towards his advancement and for program use.
Okay. I guess my only other question maybe at this time would be for Terry and Aaron. Has legal counsel looked at this?
Not at this point, no.
Okay.
Do you think that Pete should take a peek at this?
We're opening ourselves up a little bit. I mean, I see the insurance, but I don't see the policy. You know, like I'd be worried about someone getting hurt,
Right.
Well, or
maybe not following proper protective equipment or safety protocols or that kind of stuff.
or if somebody was hurt inadvertently as a result of a repair maybe that was done, or who the heck knows. That if there was any, a more formal indemnification or...
I think that would be a necessary step for
I don't
us.
see how that would in any way affect Port. All you're doing is providing us with a roof over our head
Well,
while
but-
you do it.
It's on Port property, so I just think it's just due diligence for us to have it looked at in that light, because I'm not that person.
Right, we would do a lease agreement that has indemnity clauses and hold harmless and insurance requirements, and we would require proof of insurance, so that it would be handled like any of our other leases.
Okay.
The dollar amounts would be, negligible, but that is a form that Pete has reviewed, and for all the
Okay.
these, all those liability concerns would be covered in that document, but we certainly can chat with him about it as well, because it's a little different with the age of participants.
Yeah, it's kind of curiosity to see how
Yeah.
you guys have looked at that.
Yeah, we just haven't, we wanted to have this conversation first,
Okay.
to see how you felt about it.
But this one gets a little unique, if I understand you correctly, though, that you'll be providing some labor, which is great. If there was any incidents that occurred as a result of the labor to somebody else is where I would say is the nuance to this a little bit that might lend itself to a little bit more scrutiny than would be a simple lease where, if you were making products and people were coming in and buying them, it's all you guys. But to some extent, there might be a little tweak to this that we couldn't hurt to have Pete take a peek at it.
Yeah, and it may make sense to have our insurance agents that deal with risk management, because that really is a risk management issue, so we can make a few phone calls. I don't see that as a huge hurdle for us.
Does the Port have other relationships with service like this, like Angel Job Corps or Boy Scouts or any of these volunteer groups that come in and help?
It has in the past. Angel Job Corps was used as recently as last year. They did some siding for us over in South Beach.
Or the mate.
And then we have our own volunteer group as well, the mates. But we control that directly, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, those are the two that come to mind.
So what if we, just to finish up, so you guys will have our insurance take a peek at this, but
Sure.
it's not a showstopper by any means at this
I
point.
don't believe it is. I've worked with teen programs where teens are volunteering, and in my past experience at the zoo, where teens are building cages and doing things with power tools, and it was not a huge hurdle for us.
Great. Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Yeah.
Thank
Sarah?
you.
Yeah, it's a great way to get some teenagers in Newport with something to do. There's not a lot to do in Newport, so I think it's a wonderful program. I just am concerned with the building, I guess, after hearing this. Is it almost sounds like it's a knocker downer instead of a fixer upper.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think all of our buildings down there at what used to be the Aquinas Fruit Processors, I think they're all buildings that are good enough that we should maintain them. They certainly are not, right now they're not ready for somebody to move into. But as far as the studs go, other than that one, like I said, you have to see it if I had some pictures.
Yeah, when I hear walls floating in the breeze,
Yeah,
and doors
but that's-
open for 5 years, I kind of wonder.
It's it can be fixed. That was not a problem. The other building adjacent to it's probably this one over here. The roof is in the worst shape out of all of them. but they're in salvageable condition, I believe.
Are there any other programs for construction training that they could have a project to work on or anything like that? I mean, I'm very interested in that because I'm very...
Let me tell you what I found, if I may.
Yes.
I found that there's nothing. Habitat for Humanity would like to, but they can't give power tools to just anybody because their insurance won't cover even a power nailer in an adult stand. Mine doesn't. Mine does, with the proper supervision. That's the key. Proper supervision has to be there. Being able to pick up 5 tons of equipment on a crane, proper supervision and knowledge base is required, but it's not prohibited by any means. Because of what I found, Newport Last has jumped in and provided us, we did just right over here, we did a recruitment barbecue in February, March. Newport Last provided us with all the food. I said, I think I made it for 100 people. 20 showed up, but we had $400 of food there. Rogue took us into their facility and gave us the not only tours, but we built a flagpole right then and there. It took us 40 minutes. Two Sea Scouts, newly minted, signed the papers, walked in there, built a flagpole. Same day. Excited. All sorts of excited.
Leanne, I think that answers
Yeah,
the
there's
question.
good.
I gotta keep an eye on our agenda a little bit so we can keep moving. But
If
If we bring in other
Green Food and Construction pays for our special use permit. So we're construction cooked. The program already has interest with the contractors in the area because nobody's teaching them how to use the saw.
any other thoughts?
Well, maybe some support from some of the contractors. Well, that's not it
We're
too.
gaining that. They're busy.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's good.
Walter, thoughts, questions, concerns?
Sure. It's water related, water dependent. Is this, are we not there? Ask from the city.
The city. I think that we could still, it's not water dependent, it's water related. And given their activity with boats, and I think, because one of the examples that's given as water related is marina activities, so it's close enough.
So the Coleman's free. What happens if we get someone in here that wants to rent the whole area? Lease the whole property from us, a business that wants to come in.
Yeah, that's something that we have to be aware
Yeah,
of.
then we have to have a conversation with Leon about that. I mean, it's entirely possible that, after year 1, someone could come in and want to sign a lease and pay a higher rate. So we would have a conversation about that.
Is Dulce Energy still over there, or are they
I haven't heard from them in a couple months. Now, that was around the time frame that they said that they would be contacting me again about leasing space along the southwest corner of the property, right over here.
right?
But eventually, they want to be big enough to inhabit that entire everything that's inside the yellow there and the whole facility, and grow seaweed out of it and sell it. So.
But that's their ideal situation.
Oh, yeah.
But the reality of it is it seems like even initially, Dulce and the Sea Scouts could coexist for
Yeah.
probably quite a while. If need be.
We're a bunch of pirates. We take over. I'm sorry, I've already got one in Noah. He's working for Noah, and I'm surprised he's not here because he said it gets off work at 6. But we would just go, and they come in, and we just, hey, you want to hire a Sea Scout for free? Yeah, okay, here they are.
Culture analogy will be the next thing.
Well, aquaculture is a marketable skill. Vocational training follows marketable skills. It's pretty simple.
Walter, anything else?
Yeah, last year. So if you did any work on our facilities, who would be supervising you? I mean, would it be up to codes? I mean, would it be a contractor involved? I I mean,
I work for a contractor, does that help? I mean, I can pull that string.
We would have supervision through our harbor masters and our maintenance crew.
I'm just saying, if they did some repairs on our building and release it out again, if something happened, who would be?
Well,
Who would assume that risk?
I'm not sure that we would have them do repairs on buildings.
Yeah, I think we'd be very, it would be very, we need to be very careful in choosing on what we're going to do for that.
I'm just reading what's here. They talk about repair on buildings.
Yeah.
But there certainly are plenty of repairs that are very well within their capability, and I think it's the same type of assessment like when Jim asked about, our folks doing certain jobs. There's a certain threshold where we don't want to take that on, and we would assume to push that risk on someone. It'd be the same thing with Sea Scouts. There'd be a threshold of risk there.
So they would interface with you most likely
Yeah.
on the jobs before they get
Definitely.
rolling.
We wouldn't want to go and just start doing stuff without having somebody, having talked to somebody about what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because 5 minutes later, somebody comes by, what did you do that for? We can't have that there. That means that we have to reverse everything we just did. So that's not in our best interest, even though we teach them skills and teach them the bad side of
Teach them how to communicate better.
but it also teaches them how to communicate effectively.
Jeff? Thoughts?
Are there any other Sea Scout programs in Oregon?
8. And ours reaches to Dallas. We're doing what had been for the last 9 months I've been told not to do is now being sanctioned at the national level, and it hasn't filtered down yet, so nobody knows about it until a little over a week ago. And our district executive went to training and found out that National has completely flipped on the whole concept of staying in your district, staying in council. We've gone outside of our council. We're doing that. It's called seeding. Go figure.
So if there's 8 other programs in Oregon, I wonder if there's something that can be gleaned from those 8 programs. What do they do with insurance? How do they handle certain leases or different aspects of it? Maybe some go on there.
7 of them are at one facility in Portland Seaways.
Okay.
So I believe they're backed by a yacht club, but I'm not sure. And the yacht club owns the facility. I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure. I don't know how that works. The other one is the SSS Seawolf in Eugene. They're at Fern Ridge. They are chartered by the yacht club, and close facilities what they use for their activities. All of their boats are owned by the council, though, and handled by the council because the yacht club won't take the boats and insure them.
So this type of program sounds good to people and communities. They like to get behind it.
And those are pure maritime programs. Ours is vocational. Ours is
Devil's in the details, and I guess if this moves further down the road, we get more information from staff on some of the questions that have been brought up, like insurance.
Lease termination or...
Yeah, what are the economics of how something would happen, what happens in other districts, that type of vetting. So be interested to see where things go.
You want to talk more about the economic side?
Not right now, we don't have time. We need to keep things rolling on here, but I think your points are made, and again, from staff's perspective, it sounds like there's a couple more things that you guys will flesh out a little bit on this, but it sounds like, if I can jump in here, it seems like, in general, the commission is supportive of this idea, presuming some of these details can get worked out. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's great.
Yep. So does that give you guys enough direction at this point to work more exclusively with Leon?
Yeah, and I think we've got this grant to pursue, and we can talk about risk management and the lease term and things like that.
Okay.
We've got some things to work on.
And again, this isn't going to impact Jim over there. I think his office is still in that.
Yeah, his office is in that middle building right there. He's not good yet.
Okay. All right. So do you guys have enough to go on? from,
Yes.
do you need anything else from the commission at this point?
No, I think we should just let Leon know that we'll be in touch this week about the grant application and see if we can put our heads together on that. And we'll follow up on some of these other things with you. So.
But presuming there aren't any other issues associated with the insurance, the risk management, or anything that you think you need to bring to the commission, do you need anything else from us? Or Jeff, do you want to see more details before, or do we leave it up to the interim GM to provide us with the information if it rises to that level of concern?
I don't know, I guess it depends on what comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can give you an email update, and when we get through some of this, and if you have questions about that, we can communicate about that. I mean, I think most of these things are resolvable, and I think we just need to get you some answers back about some of the questions you've asked. So,
Would that work for you?
Yeah.
I think that's it, and I just don't want it to hold up for another month while we're
Yeah.
waiting for that. So it sounds like you'll get some work done, you'll update the commission on this, and then you can work directly with port staff on this, and we'll see where it goes.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be able to tell Sea Scout we'll be looking at pulling an engine to get it running.
Great.
We'll be excited.
All right. Okay.
Actually, 3 of them will be excited.
Let's move on to our next item on the agenda, Loyalty Days Carnival. You guys have a letter in the packet, or we do. Terry, do you want to provide some context for
I
this?
will provide some context. I thought Sergeant Boveda would be here to speak to this. We have a special use permit with a carnival company that runs the carnival aspect of Loyalty Days. The revenue generated from the carnival is used to provide 4 college scholarships to high school young women in the Newport community. And a year ago, the rate for the special use permit increased from the $500 the carnival company had been paying for years to $1,500, and that created a situation where the Loyalty Days group, they scrambled at the last minute to provide the 4 scholarships last year, but they depleted some reserves in order to do that, and they came to me asking to reduce that fee back to the $500 because they will not this year be able to use, they don't have those reserves obviously to use this year, and it would mean 3 scholarships instead of 4. And so I talked with them a bit about the desire that the port has to make sure that those special use permits generate enough revenue so that we can put money back into the maintenance of parking lots and other facilities that they use. The carnival primarily uses the multi-purpose parking lot area out here, and it's 4 or 5 days of setup of fairly heavy equipment, and so, I mean, there is wear and tear that's legitimate there with an activity like that. A little bit different than a run or something where we don't charge more than a application fee kind of situation. So, and just for context, the Seafood and Wine Festival pays $5,700 for the space, and they have a cost of living adjustment every year of, I think, 2% to their fees. And so that's a larger, much different sort of financial, business model for that event than it is for the Loyalty Days Carnival. But the same kind of wear and tear occurs, and so that's the purpose of the special use permit fees, is basically to allow us to continue to have money for upkeep of facilities. So when I talked with the Loyalty Days folks and let them know that we're trying to bring some equity to what we charge and for those usage purposes, they understood that, but they're really hard pressed to come up with this extra $1,000 to be able to provide this scholarship. So I did talk with them about that we would ask the commission to consider reducing it for the loyalty days in it'll be 2019, right? Because it's in May, I believe. So in 2019, but that in future permits, we would probably have to implement an escalated fee of some percentage to raise them gently over a series of years rather than going from 500 to 1,500 in 1 year. And the reason it was a surprise to the Loyalty Days Volunteer Committee is that our special use permit is with the carnival producer, who did not communicate that change in special use permit fee to the Loyalty Day folks until it was already happening. So that's, and the letter here from Sergeant Boveda, it speaks about the community impact of the program and the scholarships. So I guess my recommendation, you want a recommendation? Or
Well,
do you want to just talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, does anybody have any questions?
Not at this moment.
I just usually we leave it up to the general manager if they want to do a drop the fees or drop the fees. I mean, we leave that up to the general manager or Director Bob. So whether it's up to you. Your purview. It's not going to be up to us to lower the fees on everybody. But if you think it's a benefit to the community and everything like that, I think that you would be supportive of lowering the fee or whatever.
And this approval process of that special use permit took place during a time when I know one of the goals was to generate more revenue from special use permits and try to bring some equity there. At least that's what I read in minutes. And so I thought it best just to make you aware that my recommendation would be that we bring it back down to the 500 and then progressively escalate it at some rate that's palatable to the community group. I mean, I think there's tremendous benefit to the community. It's part of our mission to support this community, and I think it's an important slice of what we do.
So my daughter got one of those scholarships.
Well, there you go. So, a real life example. Yeah.
I think there's 4 princesses that,
There are 4 princesses.
and only 3 scholarships. Or the scholarships go to any women, any girls in school, or just the
I think the
They pull
scholarship
together
goes
last
in
year.
those.
The queen gets the big scholarship.
Ooh. Isn't that the way life is?
Let's we digress here. So, Jeff, did you have anything? And I would say, as much as I totally agree with you, Walter, in terms of the discretion of the GM on this, but I do appreciate you bringing it to us. I think special use permits are important for us all to be aware of.
Yes, they are.
Whether it's appropriate or not to approve that.
From the last budget, this was one of those unintended consequences of collateral damage of jacking up the rates, just willy-nilly,
Yeah.
and not having any discussion in it. So.
And mostly this was just an awareness item for you because you're out in the community and I wanted you to understand sort of how this rolled up and how we're going to unroll it. So.
And they have plenty of heads up on the process by which rates could be increased.
Well, I
in the
will
future.
follow
So
up in writing so that it's...
Would it be the same cost of living stuff that you do for the seafood and wine?
I think I might do it a little bit differently because that number, I mean, they're already at such a big number.
Right,
2% of,
right.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that and see. I don't know, I'm not sure. I'll get back to you on that. detail.
Okay, any other discussions on the item? All right, let's continue to move down the line here. We don't have any items removed from the consent calendar, but accounts paid. Mark, did you want to say anything about the layout and format?
Sure, you'll notice that the layout of the accounts paid report looks different than in past meeting packets. The format of the report that we used to say would take staff a lot of time to prepare. Every time exporting data, copying and pasting, we have to research descriptions for each, or probably 75% of the bills that we identify on there, some reconciling has to be done. This version is pulled right from our accounting software, making it much faster for us to get all the data in one place without having to look up. The way our accounting software is set up, a lot of these invoices that have multiple smaller invoices attached, we just don't get anything out of the software. That's where we have to do research, we have to pull up the bills, type things in. That's all been eliminated with this. Also with this, it allows some formatting. So on here, you'll notice we have a column for our profit centers that hasn't been reported in the past. That can stay, it can be removed. Everything else is...
Where was that from?
Right over here.
So second
Oh, I see.
column is right before the amount.
Class.
Right. That can be removed, but that can be removed if I did that portrait, the landscape. We have that type of customization that can happen with that. It's going to take a few more pages this way. So we will cut down our time each month in preparing this report. If we can stick with this format. All of the same information is there. It's just looks different.
Well, that's an improvement.
Yeah, thoughts?
I love efficiency. Good job.
Not as good as $100,000 from last week.
Yeah.
And I have to say that, I mean, as soft-spoken as you are on this, Mark, I mean, this really is a big time saver. I mean, what it allows Mark and his group to do is focus on other issues.
Yeah.
And, man, what a great identification of efficiency. So, nice job to all you guys on that front.
I do like the class included, and I don't mind reading none.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's nice to have class.
Yeah, I know, something I'm looking at.
I can say that. All right, any other discussions?
I know what you're implying.
Any other? Okay. Let's move on to the next item, new business. We have a couple of things to consider here, some fairly important issues. I'd like to tee off this first discussion here regarding the general manager hiring process by first indicating more publicly or formally to clarify that my intention to apply for the position when and if it becomes available, and as such, I have a potential conflict of interest. I have spent some time, a great deal of time chatting with our SDAO representative on this, and he's made it very clear to me that as a potential conflict of interest, it's still very appropriate for me to participate in these discussions until I would actually apply for it, in which case it would become an actual conflict of interest, in which case I would clearly recuse myself from any discussions about it. So with that, I'm certainly, I don't want to spend too much more time on that unless anybody has any other questions for me specifically. I'd like to look at more of the bigger picture of these two positions. Terry's going to brief us on this, as she spent a lot of time chatting with SBAO and report staff on these two positions. I do want to preface this, and I will take some license as the head honcho right now and say, I do feel like these two positions are, I feel that it's important for us to continue to move forward on these things, on these positions. I think these are key leadership positions within the port. I think it's important to continue to show that the port and the commission is continuing to move forward with business, the business of the port as we're progressing. I think there's some vulnerability of again, I want to move forward with these things as cautiously and as focused as we can, but I do feel like it's in the port's best interest to look very closely at these two positions and keep them moving forward. And I think on that note, at this point, unless anybody wants to have any comments initially, we're going to turn it over to Terry and have her explain a little bit about how this PD, and we'll just start with the general manager hiring, the PD, the hiring process, and let her describe how she got to where she is, what the proposed process would be, and how that came to be. unless the commission has any other thoughts they'd like to mention at this point. And of course, I'll have more time to chat. Okay, Terry, yours.
So, I apologize that when the packet got put together, Kieran and I didn't communicate smoothly about what order. I think it might be easiest to look at page 71, which is the organizational chart, the proposed organizational chart first. And the reason I say that is that we're not only going to talk about the general manager position, but a newly defined position, which is the director of business operations, that would be replacing the former director of finance position, which is a peer position to Aaron's director of operations position. So I just want to make sure that you see that and understand sort of how these positions all fit together. And we can talk more about director of operations responsibilities after we talk about the general manager. But just for context, at least in my brain, it helps me to look at that picture and understand sort of where people fall out. And the fall out is probably some good, but and where people are aligned in the organization. The numbers in parentheses on that organizational chart represent the number of staff that are in that specific area. So I hope that that's helpful to see that. I have had numerous conversations with George Dunkel, who continues to amaze me with his experience in executive recruiting, and I thought I'd done a lot of recruiting in my career, and I'm learning stuff from him every time I speak with him. So we're in good hands. I think George is very prepared and is supportive of starting this recruitment as soon as we're ready to start the recruitment. He put together a draft timeline, which is page 65, that is contingent upon the commission approving the agreement with special districts to run the recruitment for us at the cost of $5,000 and approval of the timeline and approval of, in concept, the position description. And the reason I say in concept is that we haven't had a chance to talk through duties and responsibilities and qualifications, and I want to make sure that you understand that I am not saying this is it, this has to be it, and we're going with this today, because I know you wouldn't agree with that. So I spent a lot of time talking to George about the position. I spent a lot of time soul searching, sort of thinking about my first 2 months in this job and what I've observed and what I've experienced. And I looked at the current position description, and really the current position description is still very much accurate. What I did with this position description was look at some other nonprofit, governmental, and private positions that had a similar set of responsibilities, and I borrowed some language in different areas because I'm amazed at how people are writing position descriptions and recruitment postings these days, and some of the characterizations of the kinds of people and the suitability of individuals that people are looking for is much more creative than I was ever doing, and certainly our governmental HR folks at Metro weren't that creative, and so I was looking for some really accurate characterization of the kind of person we're looking for. The duties and responsibilities, I believe, are clear cut. I think the description of court experience or not is one of those areas where I want some help from you. I think I feel like I've come into this position and didn't know much at all about courts, and I've learned a lot but there's a whole array of things I haven't even started to learn about. Yet, I think that someone who has that aptitude to learn and has a willingness to listen to stakeholders and do that learning, I think you can be successful in this position. Are you the best person in this position versus someone who comes with that background? Hard to say, because it's all about the package that each of us brings to a position, right? And some of that is background and experience that's specific to the work you're doing. But a lot of the things that are specific to this position are about leadership and management and about communication and relationship building and outreach and working with the business, what am I calling that position? The Director of Business Operations on looking at new business opportunities and doing analysis and actually making connections and doing what we call economic development work. And so a lot of those skills and experiences are in the communication, relationship building realm of things. And there's a lot to be said for people who come with that deep experience, who have done business development and economic development, and yet they may not bring great management and leadership skills. And so it's sort of this, what are the things that you really want to hang your hat on, that you really want to say, we've got to have this in a position. That's the hardest part about doing this. And then the second hardest part is when we're interviewing people to really get into their brains and understand what are their characteristics and qualities that are the fit and suitability piece with the commission and the team that work in the port and our stakeholders and our community and the people we're working with. And so it's a lot of guesswork in terms of how you describe positions. And so I'm interested in any feedback you have after just having a couple of days to look at this. And I also would be interested in feedback for the next week or so, if you have other thoughts after we're done at the meeting. So I'll stop there and let you give feedback if you have feedback now on that.
And we'll stick with the GM for right now.
We'll stick with the GM for right now. And then I also want to talk a little bit about timeline and the recruitment agreement piece, but I thought we'd talk about this first.
Well, I started with Jim West and Jeff. Let me start down this way.
Something Terry said about the required port experience, or sometimes there's other skill sets are more important, and she said this position may be more about leadership and management. Mm-hmm. I agree with that. When we went back the last time and George Dunkel gave us the Port of Laurel prospectus, and we wrote about the ideal candidate, I wrote down two things. If I could just have two sentences for what we would want, here's my two sentences. First, possess the communication and interpersonal skills to work effectively with the staff, the commission, port users, the community, nearby port, and state and local officials. So basically, they can work with people. Mm-hmm. Second thing, possess the ingenuity, analytical problem-solving skills, and cooperative management skills to meet the challenge of directing infrastructure, maintenance, and economic development with financial efficiency. So they need to be able to work with projects and manage efficiency. We have a lot of problems to solve. So those are the two things I'd like to see from the candidate. They can work with people, and they can work with projects and be successful. Maybe the best person for the job would end up being a city manager. They hadn't worked it before, but they've worked in that type of environment. So that is sort of my overarching thought of what we would look for. And I don't want to necessarily say you must have port experience or we won't consider them. That's my first thought.
Do you think Terry's right up here? I don't know if you had a chance to talk to it in great detail, but do you think she captured those 2 points that you were looking at or in some of these, or
In her skills and abilities section, there's 3 of them. I think it really hits on with the working with people. I would, just for me, my personal preference would do a little more teeth on the projects. Somebody has to be successful. They got to be a competent person that can handle. They got to pull the rabbit out of the hat in some of their infrastructure and how are we going to be successful.
so the skills and abilities section seem to be very relevant as much as to.
Yeah, I like the skills and ability section. We need the type of person we need. Yeah.
Other thoughts, at least, everybody will have a chance to chime in here. I'm just going down the line, so.
That's overarching.
Okay. Walter, any initial thoughts on things?
Well, this will be number 4 for me. And the last 3 did not have much port experience. The first one, I worked with lots of port experience. He was here for a long time. So I am going to insist that we put a lot of port experience on there, just from my past experiences. As far as your description, Terry did a great job. I don't really have any direction to it.
You don't think it's too wordy and too much?
No, I think we could pare it down a little bit, but I think you captured everything that the general manager is supposed to do. I think that any prospective candidate needs to realize what they're coming into. I think that they're going to need to be able to do outreach and all that, and like Jeff said, pull that out of the hat, but also open up to print their own money. But they're going to have to be able to get some creative financing, get some projects done.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to ask the question. Under minimum experience, we talk about 6 years experience, which includes responsibility for each of the following. And the first one is senior leadership role in a complex public-facing maritime operation, including the management of staff. Is that enough for you? Okay.
As well as the preferred qualification where Terry says experience in the operation of a public port.
Right.
So that is satisfied.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's just going to be one of mine. I want to say that test. Make sure.
But I think it is important to capture these things in this PE, so it's not going to get away.
Yeah. I mean, the marketing piece for the position will be not all of these words, but it will have the important things in it.
So, other than that, you did a great job. Are we talking about SEO doing both of these positions, or are we going to do the director of business? And I don't want to digress.
We're talking about them only doing the GM position.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And like I said, whatever candidate comes, I think they're going to have to be pretty creative.
I agree.
I'll just say clarification on the amount here. I think SDAO is sort of a pay-as-you-go thing, right?
Oh,
and not to exceed at
maybe
least
not.
what they provided there. It wasn't, put
$50 an hour, not to exceed 80 hours, $4,000 plus expenses not to exceed 1,000 without additional approval.
Okay.
So I just said that.
Okay. Just so
But yes,
aware
you're
it's
absolutely
not.
right. It's hourly, not to exceed 80 hours.
Yeah, sure. Well,
And I just want to make sure that all 5 of us realize that if we don't get the right candidate, we need to say this. We don't have the right tool. We need to do this over again.
I'd like to echo that too. I mean, I think it is key to. I think us as a board need to make sure that we remind ourselves that it's better to take the time up front to get the right fit, and sometimes that means starting over.
Right.
So I couldn't agree with you more on that, Walter, in that respect.
Miracle.
Yeah.
All right, Sarah.
I agree wholeheartedly with Walter's comments on all of it, really. I like that it's a maritime operation, and not exactly port, because I think just port, we would be restricting our candidate numbers. And, I just hope that the general public hasn't given up on us as adults who can really choose a good manager. Because I feel we've come together a lot more, and see more clearly. And if we don't see it the first round, we try again. And that's all I hear echoing throughout the people I talk to is that please get us a really good general manager for the Port of Newport, and we certainly are going to give it everything we've got. But I do like this. I scribbled all over the wordage and thinking, well, I think I eliminated 1, 2, 3 or 4 of the, I could talk to you about that.
I mean, that's an important point. I mean, people can still provide these comments.
Oh,
or
yeah.
Maybe you can comment on that when we're done about how the feedback might happen.
Right.
Jim, thoughts?
I agree with all.
Yeah, I'm on.
I agree with everything that was said. Nice job.
Thank you.
I think the only thing that maybe could be teased out a little bit better, whether it fits in this position or fits in another position, is the strength and experience with grant writing. And I don't know if it necessarily fits for the general manager or a delegate of the general manager.
I put that in the business operations position, but that position description is not fully complete at this point, and I have not. I mentioned it, but I need to put more details.
And it's in here under summary of essential duties, but it's kind of coupled with a bunch of other things. I think that's a good thing for us to have strength in going further.
Yeah, we're looking to the business operations to have that depth.
Okay,
Right.
that's fine. I like all the details. I don't want to wordsmith it or anything, but nice job. A strong leader.
I'll just make one quick comment that part of my thoughts about moving forward with these positions also are stemming from the fact that initially I think we were all comfortable saying, hey, let's take a slow, methodical approach to some of this. I think where I'm coming from with this is that I think Terry's brought a lot of calmness and productivity to the position that I don't think, from my perspective, that I didn't even anticipate. I think you've done a lot to again get us back moving in the business of the port, moving forward and working with the staff well. And I think that, in my head, is what helped push me more in the direction of saying, hey, I think this is a good idea for us to start thinking about this sooner rather than later. I think if we had glaring issues that were still right in front of us, we'd be taking on too much now. But again, I just appreciate the direction you've provided and your ability to work with the staff effectively on that. And I think it helps to facilitate these kinds of forward momentum. So, yeah.
So, as far as the process, I just had 2 things. The first thing, I think it will be helpful to walk through it. Well, first, the hindsight is corporate reference. As we walk through this process, Terry helping us during the process could be a very helpful thing. And so, thankful for that. I think that could be very good. The second thing is, during the last process, I asked the question at least 4 times, how do we have more to make our decision other than basically a 2-day max sort of session? And we hire the person who best sold themselves. I don't think we want to do that. I asked the question, how can we talk to people who work for this person, with this person, or in this person's community? How can we know more about the competence of this person other than what they're telling us and what they presented on paper? And that was my biggest concern. I never got that question answered. That's a question that I'm going to be asking because I think we all may be a little gun-shy now. And I don't want to vote until I feel somewhat confident.
And that might be something to direct at George.
Yeah. George and I talked about that, understanding that that's a sensitive area and there's a desire to do a deeper dive in who is this candidate and what kind of person are they and how do they interact with people under stress, how do they interact in different kinds of situations. And the other really interesting piece that's really important to me, and I don't know that I really captured it here, but You want a candidate that has, okay, this is going to sound goofy, that has a passion for public service and a public process of being a public employee. It's a different way to work, and I think you need someone who can demonstrate that they embrace that and they understand the requirements and the rigor involved, because it is a slower process in which to work. It's just a different world, and I think it's something I feel so strongly about, and it's something I think is so important that we interview for that, as well as how does this person interact under stress, or when there are certain situations you can put folks in or they end up in, and how do people interact, and how do they deal with staff in complex situations, and all those kinds of things. Those are the hardest things to interview for. And between background checking and finding people to talk to, and we've even done sort of role playing sort of situations with smaller groups and that sort of thing. So it's difficult. It's important.
Okay, well, yeah.
Is there going to be a big role in, I heard that from our last go around, that there was a bigger role with community representatives than in the last search, that they were a search committee. Do you know anything, Walter? Was that the norm, that we get a community search committee or something? I kept hearing that. How come you're not doing a community thing?
Last time when we hired Kevin,
It was just a constant thing I heard. When do you have the community review? Which we did.
so when Don retired and we hired for Kevin's process, the full commission was not involved. It was only the commissioner, so it was a subcommittee. And they were coming back and reporting to us. And so there was a search committee with 5 or 6 members of the public and 2 commissioners. And so it was a little bit different.
That must be what they were referencing.
And there was a lot less input from the whole commission, so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that we were all involved.
Right.
So, and that was just how the process went at that time, and so we're doing it different this time. We need to reinvent the wheel every time we do this. Hopefully we can keep doing it.
Well, I mean, that's a good point.
And
go ahead.
and I was going to say, and we did have the citizens panel last time, and I think that we need to make sure that we incorporate what they recommend.
Right.
Make them feel like
Yeah,
they're part of the process.
I would feel a little weird to go through the whole thing with just 2 commissioners involved.
Yeah.
So I think to that end, it's an important point that we didn't really touch on. It seemed like, at least in the draft timeline that was presented here, which again, draft, there was an opportunity for a search committee to basically trim down the list to sort of viable candidates. If I understand this, Terry, you can jump in here. And by that sort of subcommittee, if you will, was to basically separate the wheat from the chaff here a little bit.
Right, the baristas from the...
Yes, say. So that would require at least a couple of folks from the commission here to participate in something like that, along with yourself and George, I assume, to be an initial sort of filter, after which, and again, the commission would still have access to all of the applicants, I assume.
Yeah.
But
Well, I don't think all the detail, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
I don't think all the detail is in this timeline of options that we have. So in my experience with this level of position, we would have an opportunity for staff to do sort of a group interview with each of the candidates, or maybe the top 3 candidates. I mean, you can go through phases of kind of winnowing it down, and we really want the staff to have an opportunity. We want the full commission to have an opportunity. We want the community key stakeholders to have an opportunity. And so we can build, that's part of what George and I talked about, and he really wants to know what you want out of this process. This timeline was just to give you a sense of the big pieces. But there are other opportunities for us to build in those meet and greet / interview. You can do them in different formats where people do a 15-minute presentation. There's time for a few, maybe prearranged questions, and I've done those kinds of public sessions, and then people have a sheet of paper where they can write comments about each of the candidates if they want. Those kinds of things. But I think it's really important for this commission and for key staff to have that opportunity to.
Yeah, and last year, as I recall, we didn't really have any say in the initial whittling down.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that
Because there were like 44 applicants, and some was a barista from somewhere, and that's what.
right. And part of it
Richard
depends
Stone
on what your
told us.
pool looks like.
Right.
He had whittled
That
it
will
down.
define a bit sort of how elaborate or not that process is of going from 44 to a manageable group of 3 or 4, whatever it sounds like makes sense to interview.
Right.
And the other thing I will caution is because we did it for years in my government experience in these high-level positions. We had so many stakeholders and 2 different boards of commissioners and counselors and all these people that we exhausted candidates, and it took so long to get through the process. We lost people to other positions. And that's the other risk. You want to be thorough, and you want to be inclusive, yet you have to understand if someone's desirable to us, they're out there and they're probably desirable to someone else. And if we take too long, we run that. And more than once, we have lost super candidates that way. And so we have to right-size this so that you get what you need out of the process and the community gets what it needs, but we also don't want to lose people. So
Caution taken.
it hurts your heart when that happens.
So I think at this point we got to keep moving here. But what do we need right now? What do you need from the commission?
So right now, I need to know, I think I've heard about the position description, and for other than a couple of points that I made notes of, and I would like to get, thank you, from you. I can make some changes and send it back out if you have comments. We have a week or so to play with this language and wordsmith if you want to. I'm not the best writer in the world, and so I borrow things from other people, and sometimes you put it together, it's like, ooh, that doesn't sound good. And then I need to know that the timeline.
Before we go to that, so
That's right.
everybody will get comments back to you initially, so that you can develop a more formal, sort of final version of this that you'll send to the commission. Is that
Well, I was
right?
going to incorporate the comments I heard tonight, send it back out to you all tomorrow,
Okay.
and with an email that says, get any comments back to me by Monday, let's say. And then I will, in the meantime, start putting this into, maybe George will be back from his hunting trip, hopefully successful, he'll be smiling in a good mood. And we will put this into a format that looks more like what they used for the Port Moro, sort of the marketing piece. I also need to put this in more of our position description format, which is a little more detailed than this. And that can be done next week.
So you'll shoot that out to the commission again for after you've got everybody's comments back, let's say.
Yes.
And then once you have everybody's comments and in that format.
In the format that would be the piece that would go out to people that are posting, so to speak, I would send that back out. Because that would be a condensed version of this, and I want to make sure we captured the important points that all of you are looking to see in that. They're important. And we will do that and get everyone's consensus on that before it is posted or goes anywhere.
Okay. And George will take a peek at it too.
Well, yeah, George,
he'll
I'm sort of acting like I'm doing this, and George is really the one who's going to tell me what to do. But, he's hunting, so
Are people comfortable with that, at least as the PD goes? Okay, so next.
That's right. The next piece is the comfort level with the timeline. Obviously, timelines are guides, and oftentimes things take longer, or usually longer when it's a recruitment. But roughly, George, with his experience, felt very comfortable with his timeline, and with the understanding that I will talk with him more specifically about what I've heard tonight in terms of involvement with other stakeholders in the interview process, with staff in the interview process, and with the commission in the interview process, so that you all get an eyeball-to-eyeball meeting with folks, and that, I think that's important. I think it's important to have a couple of liaisons that, I mean, you'll have interview opportunities, but I think it's important to have a couple of liaisons to the staff group or to the community group that you would be able to listen to their feedback and bring that back to the board, to the full commission. I think that's an important thing. There's a lot to be said for hearing it firsthand and then relaying it back to the rest of the commission. I don't think you all have to do that. It makes sense to have two people as liaisons, or whatever we want to call those two people, to that process. And also, if George has process questions that I feel like I need to get a second opinion, I could contact the two liaisons for that kind of information. So,
But it sounds like there's still a lot of interfacing to do with George on this. Do we see, if the job description meets the satisfaction of everybody in the commission, and George and yourself, we can work out the details associated with the search committee, the process of the community groups, and all that kind of stuff while this thing is out. I mean, we don't have to have all that nailed down before you put it out?
no, I don't think so. I think,
So let me just interject you again. So to that end, this process of appointing or looking for volunteers for people to participate as members of the search committee, at least initially, from the commission, doesn't have to be decided tonight.
no,
Okay.
I don't believe so.
And to that end, it sounds like when George comes back, there might be an opportunity for either a special work group meeting with George to specifically walk through some of these in the next couple of weeks or so.
I think that's important.
So that the commission can ask him, and we can establish that a little bit more formally.
Yeah, and just
Might
sort
be-
of flesh this out a bit.
Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah.
Oh, just formality part. We do need to adopt a formal process and then have public comment on it before we can go forward with the process.
Yeah. So all those details.
I have to reread. George made a list of those.
And then we have to adopt formally adopt the process and then have public comment on it before we can move forward with the hiring process.
We could do that in a work session sooner rather than later.
Yeah. But I think I think we could approve the draft pieces we have tonight and still have a work session to. Right. Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'd suggest just cover basically some public comment on the process now. We should probably do that.
Now.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
I'll just ask.
All right, a breach of protocol here, but on the advice of my secretary here, I'll allow the public to chime in here whether you've submitted a comment sheet or not. Anybody have any thoughts or initial comments on the processes that we've been chatting about? Again, there'll be more opportunities to chime in later.
Good.
Thumbs up.
Good. Thumbs up.
Duly noted.
Go.
Thumbs up. 2 thumbs
Thank
up. All right.
Sorry,
No,
but yeah, I just want to make sure we cover it.
But I think it is important. Thank you. Terry, I think it probably is important to reach out to George and see if we can schedule a work session here, probably sooner rather than later, so that we can formalize all this stuff, allow the commission an opportunity
Yes.
to chime in on it, and we might be able to do it all in one session, to outline it all and make sure people are comfortable enough with that. Okay. Terry, unless there's something else, it sounds like we've got the PD pretty well along. We've got an idea for a work session. We'll continue flushing out the process, and we'll do that in a work session. Do you need anything else on
Well,
this?
the only other thing is I need your approval to move forward with this agreement with SDAO.
Right.
Appointing them as our search, a manager of our search.
Correct, correct.
All right. Do you need a motion for that?
We probably should take a note, yeah, the form he has you signing it, so I'm not just giving you the authority to enter into this agreement. So we should have a motion.
Okay.
So I move that we enter into negotiations with special districts to conduct our general manager search for the amount of 80 hours, 50 hours.
Yeah, it's right there, it's paragraph 3.
Page 70.
Let's describe it in the new packet.
As described again, agrees to provide the consulting service at a rate of $50 per hour, not to exceed 80 hours, $4,000 plus expenses, not to exceed $1,000 with additional approval.
Second.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. You have it, Sharon.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, the other position to review is the proposed Director of Business Operations. I understand that this is a departure from the Director of Finance position that we had in the past. We have, when you go back and look at the organizational chart, you'll see the accounting supervisor position, which we didn't have prior to Mark being promoted, hired and then promoted into that supervisory position. And so I feel that the Director of Finance position description has changed a bit with Mark taking on a lot of duties in the accounting and day-to-day financial operations world with the court, and doing a mighty fine job, I might add, including his team, doing a mighty fine job. And the changing this position actually was recommended by Todd Kimball, our financial consultant, and one of the things that Todd pointed out was very important that we retain in the Director of Business Operations, which is a working title. If anybody has a better whiz-bang title for it, I'm open to that as well. That we retain the high-level financial planning and analysis role in this business operations position, and the establishment of financial policy, and just that next level up of the strategic approach to financial management. This position also would then be responsible for human resource management. We don't have a designated human resource management position in the court currently. Becca has taken on, through her own initiative, learning all kinds of human resource, the vital pieces around hiring employees and injury processing, all those kinds of, medical issues and injuries, and returning to work after injuries. And she's the key player in the Oregon Pay Equity Project we're working on, that new state law. And so, Becca has taken on the lion's share of that, and we just reach out to consultants whenever we need help with other things. But we really need a management position that has that responsibility to further develop our capacity in-house to handle what's reasonable for us to handle in-house with the staff the size we have, and then work with consulting services for the more in-depth, more complex work. This position would be responsible for working with the general manager on economic development projects, primarily from the business analysis, the financial analysis and business case analysis side of things. But I would see this position and the general manager and the director of operations, Aaron's position, all three of these positions would interact in various aspects of economic development and business outreach, just based on the kinds of projects and who makes best sense to be involved in certain aspects of that. Identifying and applying for appropriate grants, and that's part of the ongoing evaluation of the port's financial position and ensuring that our assets are, that we're managing our assets and we're preparing appropriate budgets for maintenance and repair of those and renewal and replacement. And the other piece is just the continual improvement of our internal business operations. So thus the change from Director of Finance to Director of Business Operations, because while this position has ultimate responsibility to ensure that the finance team, finance and accounting team, I think we're kind of using these terms interchangeably, but that this team meets our obligations to the state in preparing budgets and planning and just financial management in general, and doing the high-level analysis and planning and analysis of our financial situation, and working with our lenders and banks and refinancing of bonds when it's appropriate, and all those kinds of things that are just, quite frankly, too much for Mark to have on his plate, but we need someone managing all of that. Mark has a full plate managing the day-to-day. And I would hold this position responsible in the internal business operations continual improvement piece, hold this person responsible for developing a roadmap for improving our technology systems around the retail side of our operation, which is everything from the recreational marina and RV park to the retail side of what the harbor masters do in terms of forklifts and running cranes, because all those things are basically retail sales, because we charge people for those activities and storage and everything else. We have this system of handwritten forms and everything has to be re-entered, and there's a huge margin for error, and nothing speaks to it one another, and nothing dumps into a financial system. So the same thing with that report Mark was talking about earlier. There's all these systems where we enter stuff in by hand and we pull some other things and formatting. It's just craziness. So we need a roadmap for the future. To be an expensive endeavor, and I would see this happening over 5, maybe 7 years, but we need someone responsible for that, and that would be on this position's shoulders as well. And then under this position would be Mark as the accounting supervisor and his accounting team, the South Beach RV Park supervisor and the team here, and consulting and contracting services for IT support, HR support, and other resources through SDAO, like risk management, insurance, and things of that sort. So that would be under this Director of Business Operations. And the position is not, the description is not fully fleshed out, but I'm just interested in your feedback on that, because that is a departure from what we've had in the past. And I know there's been some conversation and concern about what this position would be responsible for. So
What's your rough timeline?
I would like to start, for the recruitment, I would like to start the recruitment as soon as feasible, in the next month or month and a half.
And before we get to, I'll just preface this a little bit with, as we know, technically the commission doesn't necessarily need to approve this position. It should be under the GM. But that being said, as I said before, I very much appreciate Terry bringing this to the commission and an opportunity for us all to chime in on it in various different forms here. But again, I'll throw it out to everybody here unless you had anything else, Terry.
No, that's it. We'll stop talking.
Jim, any thoughts?
Couple thoughts. Why would we fill this potentially before we fill the general management position? If they're on the same timeline, wouldn't it be a good idea to have that GM hire this position? Just kind of throwing that out there. It's kind of chicken or the egg thing.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've thought about that quite a bit. One of the challenges with a GM coming in new, let's say February, they may need 3 weeks to a month to really get their head around what this position needs to be, and I feel like we're gasping for air because we don't have anyone in that position. It's been how long?
It's been a year. About
Yeah.
a year.
Yeah.
And that's, if I might point out that this is a debate that we had before, and if we filled the position before, we might be a lot more relieved at this point.
Sure.
We were getting feedback from GM possibilities, I mean, almost across the board, that they wanted to hire, and that was my question at the time, is does the GM normally hire their own CFO?
Right.
But this is more than a CFO.
I don't disagree with it. I was just kind of curious the logic.
I struggle with it because I've come into positions where I've inherited people and there has been a challenge with that individual for whatever reason, and I've had to work with that person to hopefully improve. And it doesn't always go that way, as we all know. But I don't want that to be a burden to a new GM to come in and say, oh my God, I would have never done it this way. This doesn't make any sense. It's one of the reasons I've looked, just like I did with the GM position, I've looked through all these position listings, both in the private sector and in the public sector and nonprofit sector, and really looked for positions that have similar kinds of responsibilities, which is what I've captured here. And so this is a real position out there in the world that people have in businesses that kind of combine a lot of things, especially in a smaller workforce like we have. You combine a lot of things under each of the positions. And the challenge is these are the gaps that we have.
Right.
And I've talked to both Mark and Aaron about what are the gaps, and I talked to, and Todd, remember Todd recommended this, Todd Kimball, who, you know, he's working as an interim CFO for a variety of businesses, and his perspective was we needed a position to cover these responsibilities. So I think the position description makes sense. It's the timing piece that
Well, that's a good.
it's tough.
I see it because we needed this yesterday. You know, so I do agree with your recommendation to go forward with it.
Yeah, I mean,
It almost feels like there's a business need for it.
there is a tremendous business need today.
That HR piece is opening up lots of potential issues in the future.
Economic development.
Thank you. That's all.
Yeah. Maybe I'll bounce around, Walter.
No, I was just going to say that I think that it's pertinent that we get this position filled because it sounds like we have a lot of gaps, and with our past experience in GMs, I mean, they're going to drink from a fire hose for the first 2 months.
Yeah.
And as much as they'd like to hire a CFO, they're going to have so many other things on their plate. They want to have that. And I think for continuity's sake and for the staff's sake, I think that having someone in there that can act as a go-between between a new GM and so they can do their job, and hopefully they have some answers to questions that the staff doesn't have to. And so I think it's a good way to go forward. And I think that maybe with a couple commissioners help, you know, that's a hiring process. But I think the staff,
I love that.
I think with Terry and staff, I think that they'd be better suited to fill this position and have the less to it. So I think that if you would in the future, whenever, give two of us or one of us that is with them and not even have to say I'm hiring necessarily. because they know the needs of what they do, and it's a day-to-day operation, things that, we don't really have the detail on.
Mhm. I think it's a great idea. Maybe we'll get to that in just a second if we can. Sarah, any other thoughts from you?
Well, I think that this is going to, in the end, save the port a lot of money. I mean, looking at the matrix, I always try to think of the people that aren't real optimistic about these kind of things. And I looked at it and I could see so many improvements because we're Flintstone Port. We need to step up the game quickly, and this is going to save the port money in the long run and probably in the short run. Just the simple change of forms for the accounting and the wonderful magical things that could come from somebody that's up to date on these things and works well with people and stuff. So I think that's really a good position to go.
Great. Jeff?
Well, I came into this meeting opposed to going ahead with the hire and thinking we should wait for the new GM, but I see what you're all saying. I trust Terry and the staff. Okay.
Yeah, no, and I'll chime in on that too. I sort of agree. I think there really does seem to be a business need for this. That, and to Walter and I think Jeff's points as well. I think delaying this would probably be more detrimental than charging forward with it. So I agree. I think it sounds like everybody is comfortable enough modifying the position to not necessarily be a formal CFO, if you will, as we've had in the past, and that a position description like you see here is, it seems at least in principle in line with what the commission is thinking would be a good recommendation. So that's good. To Walter's point, and it sounds like Terry's encouragement as well. Would you like to have a member of the commission sit in? Anybody want to volunteer who made a suggestion, perhaps? I mean, keeping in mind, of course, we'll be discussing the GM hire that maybe other options there. But
Those two guys did a really good job with the financial.
I'm looking at this side of the commission, but
Vice President needs to step up too.
I'm pretty fragile, really.
all right. Well, does anybody want to volunteer to step up and be a part of this directly at this point, or do you want me to appoint somebody? I saw your hand up.
What would it look like? What do you?
Well, gosh, I don't have a timeline drafted yet. I would, I don't know, maybe participate in an interview session or two, and sort of report back to the commission about your impressions of the quality of applicants, that kind of thing. And I value so much other perspectives and the questions that come from other perspectives, because I sometimes get blinders on and I'm, running down the road. And so it's very helpful. And I use Aaron and Mark for that a lot. It's like, tell me if there are things I'm missing, or if there's another question I could be asking, because it just makes the process that much better. So just your brain.
I saw two hands.
Unless Jeff wants to do
That
it.
was a competition.
I don't care one way or the other.
All right, Walter, if you're willing to do that, that'd be great. I appreciate that, and Jeff, I appreciate your thoughts on it too. So,
And if you have any input on what I've written so far, I welcome that as well. I'm still working on this. I think I'm getting there, but I just haven't finished it yet.
okay. So again, Walter, you'll be our sort of liaison or ad hoc member to this, and you can report back to us as needed.
Detailed reports.
Detailed files. And okay, Terry, is there anything else you need from us on this?
I think that's wonderful. Thank you for your support and your feedback, and we will move forward. I will contact George, and we will find a date when we can have a work session with him.
Great. I appreciate your thoughts on looking outside the box on this and not just simply looking to what has been done in the past, and looking at it critically moving forward. So thank you for that. I think the report will be stronger for it. All right, I'm going to move on as quickly as possible to the staff reports.
So for the finance department, real quick, the financial reports for the September period are in the packet as you saw. And what I wanted to point out was within the budget column, the supplemental budget has been input for the three funds that were affected by the supplemental budget. So you can now see our unappropriated ending fund balance reserves. They're back in place in accordance with that resolution. I already went over the accounts paid report. Jeff had requested a June 30th, 2018 fiscal year-end analysis of the financial statements that will be headed to the auditors. Todd Kimball did the bulk of the work on that analysis. I think it was either just for the general operating fund. The other funds have pretty standard limited activity. So we just, for time's sake, we focused on the general fund. I didn't know if you guys had any questions. What we did on the balance sheet, which the first 2 pages, we just went through and compared June 30, 2018 year-end balance to the June 30, 2017 year-end balance, and we looked at the dollar change and looked for significant variances, and then found did some research to find explanations to those significant variances. Smaller balances we would address just because it's what happens in the normal operations. Third page to the end is profit and loss. We did the same thing. We looked at the July 17, June 18 year compared to the prior year, and we looked for a change, an activity that was either a difference of $20,000 over or under, and at least 10% different from the prior year. And then again, we listed the reasons why those fluctuations occurred.
Good.
I don't think so. My takeaway was there was nothing earth-shattering, but I appreciate it.
I appreciate
Good
it
to have
too,
you.
because the numbers were so mixed up from the previous years.
The piece of the audit report where we were required to do this.
I appreciate the brief summary too. It helps to alleviate the questions that most folks have by at least throwing out some explanation for the things.
Also, I did a summary of the port's debt, outstanding debt, and that's the landscape page. In my staff report, I referenced several different reports, and I was looking at that, and it pulled from the budget. I pulled some figures from an audit report paper, I pulled other figures from last year's audit. I decided just to summarize it on this page, so there aren't 3 or 2 different reports to wait for everything in this report. I'll just briefly go through it. It's separated by funds, so our debt is in the general fund, the bonded debt fund, and the mineral fund. In the far, let's see, starting over on the left, we list the profit center that was affected by that debt. So whatever that debt we purchased, there's the profit center, and that's also where the profit center where the debt service payments are being coded to or allocated to. So middle section, you have the name of the loan. There's the year the debt was issued, the original balance is there, interest rates, the terms, that's pulled from the budget documents. prior balance, so at June 30, 2018, there was our outstanding balance for each debt issue. The middle two columns are the budgeted principal and interest for this fiscal year. And last column, dollar value is the projected ending balance then at the end of this fiscal year, June 30 next year. Also have the estimated payoff date for each loan or the amortization schedules that they provide. Here, it's a brief summary of all the reports. A couple items that aren't on my report. At the last commission meeting, we talked about our bank accounts. We're making some changes there. Our accounts at all three banks are asking us to once again update our signature cards. So I'll be going through that process. We'll probably get another email from me asking for that personal information as we've done before. That will allow us then to go in and make the changes that we want to make. That we just discussed before. I think that's all I have.
I have one question. On the, when the date start, when the loan was taken out, so it's 21 years, 20 years, 21 years. That was from 2018, or?
I believe that I was looking at that, some of those saying 20 years versus 21 years. I didn't have time to go back through each of the amortization schedules and count how many years there. I think it might be a timing difference where maybe one loan started in the middle of the fiscal year and ended at the beginning of the next year versus...
When it says 20 years from the payoff date.
I'm sorry, that should be 20 years from the date that's listed right under...
Oh, okay, I get it. I see it. Too many numbers, I wasn't seeing that.
Right. And then
Thank
you have
you.
your original issue amount there as well. So
Right. Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
a lot of small things.
Thank you. This is a good thing for us to have
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
handy.
It's a keeper.
Yeah.
Item number 5, the $400,000 loan. Just curious about the forgiveness.
So my history with that, that I know when Kevin Greenwood was here, and I first started, I was involved in trying to get a letter that proved that we had met the requirements of that forgivable loan. I think part of that was that we had created the infrastructure that that loan paid for created 50 new jobs. I even saw the letter that was drafted, but I don't know what happened at that point. There was some hang-up. This last year, in the last audit then, our auditor, Signy Grimstead, had a list of questions for me, and one of them was she's required to contact these agencies and get her own confirmation of what her loan balance is. She has tried for a number of years to kind of pin down when this forgiveness is going to happen, because we would like to see documentation that would give us support so we can take that liability off of our books. Her last discussion with someone at the state said that they want to forgive that debt, and so they were working on redoing some of the requirements. I didn't get the full details on that. So she has a note in her last audit that the state is reworking that forgiveness. So hoping with this audit, she might get further confirmation on where that stands. I spoke with Terry and we called the state as well to find out a status on what has changed or when we can get some documentation that that loan has been forgiven. What's happened is, I think after 5 years, there was an amortization schedule that kicked in, and that's where the principal, $40,000 principal was budgeted came from. We haven't paid anything, they haven't invoiced us for anything, but that's per the amortization you foresee that?
I spoke with Ted Wirtz about this probably about 3 weeks before Terry got on board, and that's exactly the status of where it's at right now. At least as of that point. He said they still have some more work to do to get it squared away so they can actually forgive it. Initially, he thought that we were just a few weeks away from having it finalized. He's new in that position, and the more he learned, the more he realized there's still more yet work to be done. So.
Does it seem positive from your gut feeling? Or can you not make that call quite yet?
I wouldn't make that call myself. I don't have enough experience to be able to say. I would say it's taken a while, and I don't know why. And so I couldn't make that call myself.
That's good off of the second-hand information from the auditor from her conversation.
That's Business Oregon.
Yes.
And Dave Harlan is one of the people I go over and talk to in Salem. And so we can, Ted and works with Dave. So
I have the journal entry all ready to write it off. Documentation with the button.
So that would take your good money from 140,000 to 540,000. You're on a roll, Mark.
If we don't already have this electronically, can we get it electronically?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone have any other comments?
Nope.
Jeff, Walter? Good. Mark, anything else, or are we good?
I am done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Director Bob.
All right, I'm going to whip through this efficiently, I hope. So the turtle's picking up. People are switching over to beginning of crab season. We are going to start seeing crab gear showing up more in both the terminal and the commercial lot. RV park is still busy. The boat ramp starts to slow down though. This month I worked to finalize selection for the NOAA dredging contractor. That took a fair amount of my time. Also working with OBEC on the Port Dock 5 pier project. I received an inquiry from Rondis about fill material on our 9-acre property, which is why I want to put this picture up here just to refresh everybody's memory on the layout of things and where it's at. But I'll get to that in just a moment here. Conducted a tour of the Road Brewery with Berger ABAM. They started their assessment, and I found all the I already sent them the as-bills, but all the geotechnical report on fill material is out there from 1978, so they can use that to figure out their geotechnical assessment of the state of the wall right now. As far as the work for OBEC this month, we worked to look at this breaker cabinet that's at the head of. Do I have a picture over here? I don't think I do. That's all right. The breaker cabinet at the top of Port Dock 5 that we kind of focused on this month to figure out whether it needed to be moved, if so, where to, and what needed to be in it. So, in any case, that breaker panel is going to have to move toward the shore because the pier itself is going to be shorter. The new pier is going to be shorter than the old pier because the length of the ramp is longer that goes down to the floats. In the process of doing that, we discovered that we can go ahead because there's going to be a need in the future for us to upgrade, I believe, from 30 amp service to 50 amp service down there. Where sometimes we trip some breakers, especially if people are pumping on crab and they're using our power to do it all at the same time. And there's a lot of feedback from the users down there. They would rather have 50 amp service. In order to provide that, we're going to need larger conduit. We're going to need different conductors that go from the shoreline to that box. And what I wanted to do was look and see how much of that can be incorporated into work on this pier, so that in the future it's not hard to cut it over. And it basically the additional cost would be in the cost of the different material we have to get. But the only material we're going to have to get is the conduit because the conductors can't be put in right now because we haven't upgraded the docks. So without upgrading the docks, you can't put in the conductors for 50 amp service through that box and then step it back down. So we can put in the conduit and put in the required pole lines so that it'll be all ready to go. The other thing that we learned that's going to be necessary is someday when we do go to 50 amp service down there, we're going to have to put a larger transformer in on the sidewalk. PUB is going to have to upgrade that transformer. So this report was written before I found out some of that information, so I told you a little bit additional things than what's in here. Construction plans are probably about two weeks out. The nationwide permit is, we have a 401 certification for the work. The nationwide permit should be in the court in the next few days for the Port Lot 5 project. So permitting is absolutely not a problem for us. It's pretty much done. The timeline there remains to be the same. Road seawall evaluation is ongoing. Maintenance dredging contracts are complete. And we're working with Ferguson Construction right now to start figuring out when they want to start setting up the pile. We've got an increase. This is the time of year when people want to get outdoor projects done before the rain starts. So we've got an increased request for fill material. Unfortunately, this year has been more than years previous, and it's difficult because we have to coordinate them taking material from the pile. At the same time, our contractor who bid the work a few weeks ago was counting on having that amount of material so they could, build the berms on the pile the way they need it. So it does affect the way the contractor is going to need to work, but Ferguson is a very solid company, and I've been talking with him a lot. I visited with Greg Morrill out at the pile just last week and showed him kind of what the city's asking for material. We've got a couple other folks that are asking for material. And I think we have a good plan to make sure that our cost is not going to be greater. If anything, it may go down a little bit. So, Rhodas has begun clearing brush on the property. I want to mention this because you're probably going to hear people asking about what's going on. And the few times that I've been out there, I've had a couple people ask me, hey, what's going on over there? So they're starting to clear the brush off of this whole area right around here and leading on up closer to our property as well. And they're making pretty quick work of it. So as we move ahead, we have started to find some debris, and we're going to continue to run into this kind of stuff. The rail car issue, there's some old wooden pilings that have turned that we need to get rid of, and that's a picture of them right there. I didn't list these as surplus property because I don't believe they really have an appreciable value. It's garbage to me, and so we'll dispose of it properly. But I wanted to make sure you're aware of that in case anybody asked about these old wooden pilings. That's what they look like. I mean, they're really not salvageable. There's a couple flatbed rail cars out there that belong to Ted Painter. I talked to him today. He wants to keep the rail cars. He's not interested in selling them. He wants to use them for a project that he's got coming up, but he asked if we could move them for him. We're going to see if we can do something about that. They're going to be difficult to move. They're large. And he would store them for a short time, but I let him know that, our storage area is, it's going to be at a premium. We aren't going to have too much room for these much longer. So he's going to need to probably work on a way to get rid of them from our property. So.
Could you go back to the overview of the whole project?
Yep, yeah, I'm coming back around to it here. The long way.
I just have a question about that little corner on the east exit from the terminals where the cars and a lot of our surplus stuff is stored.
Yeah, right up here, right? Yeah.
Now, does that go all the way to the road? Because there's a bunch of cars from the car mechanic painter there And I didn't know if it was parked on port property.
Yeah, there's a couple cars right in there on the right-hand side that we turned in.
Right.
He contacted us about those some months back and
Yeah,
said, and that's on our property, and he's paid storage for it.
Yeah,
right
I
now.
just didn't know if there was a delineation there. So we're all the way to the road there.
Yes, yeah, we are. We are. The only exception is that property for the painter that you're talking about is this
Right.
little notch right here. That's not ours.
Right.
Everything else goes right onto the road.
Is that where you think you'd store those?
That's where
It's closest, I guess.
I believe that's probably about the easiest. I just don't want to, like I said, there's going to be, if we got to move things around out there. We've already moved a lot of the stuff that we had out here around this area on Clean Point. We've got it moved up in here.
Mm-hmm.
There's another weir or a box drain. What I think box drain is the right term for it. But it's still in the pond right there, out by the Northwest Natural Gas Facility. And we're going to need to put that someplace. I don't want to get rid of that because it's definitely valuable. And then we've got another piling that's sitting right out about here. It's this is an old wooden piling that's in actually decent shape. So, in any case. Like I said, Rhonda had originally asked us about being able to get material off of our property because they don't believe they're going to have enough fill to do what they need to do on their property. So that's what prompted me to go ahead and put out a request for proposals from local contractors to give us some ideas on how they would go about sorting through that and getting the fill from our property, which is this area right here. This 9 acres is what we're talking about. And get it over onto the Rhonda's property if that's the right thing to do with it. I've got a couple proposals in. I'm not prepared to talk about the costs or anything on them because I haven't really even reviewed them yet. I just got them. And but I do know that one of the things that's questionable is whether or not we would want to remove that material from our property because the elevation that's going to be set on the Rhonda's property is such that, well, we need to add some elevation to our property anyway. We've got the material there to do it now. So depending on the volumes that exist and how much height we want to get out of it, it may not be a good idea for us to transfer a bunch of material over to Rhonda's property because then we're going to have to truck everything over from South Beach to fill our own. So
Otherwise, everything will just drain onto our property.
that's right. Well, yeah, it'll become more wetlands is what we want to happen, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to put this RFP out there is because if we do at some point access any of that material and sell it or whatever to Rhonda's, we need to do it right. We don't want to dig more holes out there and have more wetlands, as a result. So if we do transfer material from our property, then I definitely would recommend that we grade it and get it, except for the wetlands, because we don't have a permit right now to fill our wetlands. But we can at least get our property in a decent shape so that it doesn't wind up getting worse, because it's in bad shape as it is. And that's what I wanted to, this is our property, and just to remind everybody, this should be relatively flat land, because this was all made on fill originally, so all these hills and stuff that you see out here are actually piles of material that we're talking about. Here you're looking from the northwest corner, looking straight south, and this roadway that goes in right here, in the wintertime, this is probably our biggest threat to becoming wetlands, more wetlands at some point, because it fills with water. It's probably about 6 inches or 8 inches deep, and we want to get the elevation fixed there. And so there's the pilings again. But in any case, so that's why I put that RFP out there. I did talk briefly with the city about it because we're going to have to get a grading. If we do wind up doing anything with the materials on our property, we're going to have to get a grading permit from the city because we're moving enough material that it requires that. We already have an NPDES permit or permit from DEQ, which is a 1200 CA, to go ahead and move whatever we have to move, and that's, like I said, that's a CA. We've had that since about 2003 or 2002, someplace in there, and that permit is still good. And that's what's going on this property. South Beach Boat Ramp, we ordered the signs we talked about last meeting to get the tow marks out there. The road brewery gutters, we finally found a local contractor to clean it. We'll go up on that roof. It's that far up there, and the angle of the roof is pretty steep. And even when he got up there, we may not have that contractor come back again next week. He probably isn't going to want to do the job. So,
Helicopter.
we got the gutters clean. We got the gutters clean. The downside of it is that, unfortunately, the hardware they used to mount those gutters was dissimilar to the metal was dissimilar to what's on the roof, and we have holes where the mounting hardware was put in. They used stainless, and so it ate out around on the roof. So that's going to be a project we're going to need to undertake soon. We're liable to lose some of those gutters if we don't, and that's going to need it. That was not previously identified before on any list. Maintenance crew's been pretty busy. They completed some repairs to the landing float on the ADOT, which was on the capital improvements project list at the amount of $50,000, and they knocked that project out. They fabricated and installed a new connecting plate for Port Dock 5B, rebuilt hinges for the gate on the OSP dock, stormwater filter maintenance, and then I have the rest of the reports for each location. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anyone? Jim, you got anything?
No.
On the Ronda's property, personally, I think that we should keep our material on there if we're meeting level. We don't need to take back over there. If we did have to bring some over there, we don't pay royalties on it, correct? Because we wouldn't pay royalties on it anyway.
That's correct.
Okay. And do we have any grading in our budget for this year?
No, none of this would be. If we wanted to do this, it's something I'd still have to come back to you.
Okay.
And say,
All right.
On the royalties front, one of the things that I am a little bit concerned about is the material that's on the Ron's property. When they start spreading that out, I contacted the DSL because I'm concerned that the records aren't going to be exactly what they come out with when they spread the material. They're going to measure the material by the truckload, and at the end of it, you could wind up with this discrepancy where they're reporting that they moved 35,000 cubic yards, and we're on the books for 42. And so I called the state and I said, hey, the stuff settles over time, so there's probably less there than what we're on the books for. But they also acquiesced that they haven't done a good job of keeping records on how much sand they have around the state. So at the end of the day, they said they would probably work with us with the words that they use on whatever the difference was. But they also pointed out too that if we come out, say if Ron's grades 38,000 cubic yards and we're on the books for 42, it's not like they collect. If they move 38,000 cubic yards and we report to the state that they move that much, we may still have 42,000, that extra difference on the books, but it's not like they're going to collect that from us because we're not doing anything with it. It's just, at the end of the day, it's going to be sand that doesn't exist, but it's not really reported in any way. If that makes any sense. And it probably doesn't because it doesn't.
Yeah, it shouldn't, but
No.
yeah.
But it's still real money because, as everybody remembers, what we agreed to with the Ronda's folks was we're going to pay for that in exchange for different projects over the next what would we agree on 5 years? So,
Right. But only what they're actually moving.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. But it's an important number to establish,
Right.
Because there is some real financial implications behind it for us. So that's good to have to keep an eye on that for sure. Because it will be. How would they? How do they estimate? I mean, would the people who are doing the grading provide that
They
estimate?
state what size bucket they're using on the loader, so they know that, and then they state how many truckloads they're moving. And then they're going to report that through the terminal supervisor, and we always record sand sales by our trusty service ticket system. So we have a standard process, the port process is in place to do it. And then monthly, right? It's monthly that we report. So finance reports to the state monthly on what our holdings and dredge material is. We're just going to have to, during this time period, make sometimes we fall behind on that stuff. We'll have to make it more important during that time period. So.
Is there any back and forth in this 9.5 laydown with Roundy's to start whittling at the money that we owe them for the?
Yeah, we've been talking about anything that comes up. Usually, that's the first thing that we talk about. Is
right.
This might be a mutually beneficial project, or that might be. We haven't actually done anything right now, so I don't have anything to say that we've been able to actually impact it. But
it just sounds like we have great communication between the two parties. Is wonderful.
Yeah, I just emailed Evan today, as a matter of fact, because I got a call from NOAA, from a contracting officer at NOAA who was asking about their plans, and he hasn't recently talked with NOAA about business possibilities that they might have out there, but they definitely are interested in capitalizing on it. So.
Anybody have any other questions for him? Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
I see the RV Park Recreational Marina report. Is that also anything you wanted to mention on that?
Nothing in particular. It goes into all the other locations reports.
There was a reference to some complaints. Anything significant that you didn't want to mention to the commission, or is it just?
I don't have anything significant to report right now. It's there's a lot of people that flow in through the door over here, and there's a lot of customer interaction. So
Sure.
I don't have anything that's outside the normal range as far as complaints on customers complaining about people, behind the desk.
Nothing chronic that people commenting on the same thing over and over again.
Nothing I have to report on right now.
Great, thanks. Okay, Terry?
I'll go super quickly through this because I've already talked a lot. First, I would like all of you to sign on a retirement card for Brian Farmer, who is one of our maintenance team, who is retiring after 5 years with the port. A great employee, and he would love to work longer, but he's got back issues and he doesn't want to further destroy his back, and so he's leaving. And 2 days.
Thursday
is his last day. So I just wrote a little something. If you would like to sign it, that would be great. You can read the things I skip over, but I think Oregon Pay Equity is an important one to note. Work is underway. Staff are completing those questionnaires, and we are on track to meet the state law deadline of the 31st. I will come to you in November. It's so far away, next month, with the corrective action plan with the fiscal impact of what that might be for us. I don't have a handle on that yet. We're going to try to ratchet that down as soon as we can. Starting January 1 of 19, we are liable for corrective action for any employees in any job categories where there is inequity, and we need to bring equity to that work classification or that job classification. We have 3 years by which the state has given us to make that corrective action or take corrective action, which means to increase someone's pay. But it's retroactive to January 1 of 19. And I think the spirit of the pay equity law is such that we wouldn't want to delay it any longer than we absolutely had to if we had a budget impact issue. So, and this was unbudgeted in this fiscal year because we didn't know this law was coming this fiscal year. So we will come to you with the best numbers we have at the meeting in November, and we should have pretty good numbers by then, don't you think, Becca? I think we should have pretty good numbers, and we will have an analysis as to whether or not we can accommodate that in the remainder of this fiscal year, and or options. So that's an important financial piece that it's a state law, and we're complying, and we will do the best we can, and we want to be as fair and as equitable as we possibly can. So we're working hard on that. The next thing, I'll jump to the bottom. The Berger ABAM team worked back and forth with me on dates for the kickoff for the strategic business planning and capital facilities planning team visit, which is a 2-day adventure. And we couldn't get their team and all of you and our team together without missing somebody. And so, unfortunately, Jeff, I think, is going to miss at least one of these days. But we're going to try to get him on a phone call so he can at least listen and participate to whatever extent makes sense. And then we'll follow up with some in-person time with the consultants and Jeff at a later date. But Monday the 19th, we'll do some work with their team and our team in the morning, but in the afternoon on the 19th, and I will send you a calendar invite if that's easy for you to just accept it on your calendar. 4 to 6 p.m. We don't have a location yet, but we will want you to participate with some of the staff in a SWOT analysis with the consultants. And then Tuesday, we'll have other activities, and then from 4 to 6 again, we'll have our first open house. And again, TBA on the location. You are all invited to participate. It is not a public meeting, and as long as you are all warned that you cannot deliberate during the open house, no deliberation, or it would be a violation of public meeting laws. But that will be in a format where there'll be some presentation and then stations around the room where the consultant team members will be taking input from the public on various questions. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, and I will send you more details about that. But I'll send you both of those as invitations so that you can have it on your calendar, and if it works for you, and if you'd like to participate. We really, 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 really want you on the 19th from 4 to 6, and on the 20th it's an option, but I think it would be a wonderful show of commissioner involvement to the community to be there for that first open house, and I imagine we'll have a very robust turnout for that. We're going to really beat the bushes to get the word out to people, and I think that it would be great to have you visible and involved in that. And we'll have treats. Okay.
Barbecued steaks?
No, not one pound ribeye, but thank God for that.
Beer?
Terry, just before you
Yes.
jump ahead, were there any comments or questions about the strategic business planning process, those open houses, or anything you have at this point? Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. You all received a letter of request from Heather Mann on behalf of the Midwater Trawlers Cooperative asking for a support letter for at the federal level. They're trying to correct a mistake that was made regarding the boat buyback loan, and I don't see a lot of political risk or risk in general with you all supporting that. There's a huge congressional delegation that has signed on to support it, and I would recommend that we send a letter that all of you sign on of support of that. I don't know if you have any questions about that that I can answer. Heather was going to be here tonight, but she had a family conflict, and so she's not able to be here.
Yeah, Jeff?
I declare an actual conflict of interest as I follow along. There's 2 fishing vessels that would be impacted.
Okay.
Thank you. Walter?
No, I think you should say. It's a good program. No, and it's something that needs to get done years ago.
Any other thoughts?
I'm in agreement.
Been a dead chicken around the fleet's neck forever.
Yeah. I think we're definitely all in agreement.
Okay, so I'll get a letter drafted. And then the second request for a letter, this is for a letter of thank you and appreciation to the Coastal Caucus. And we could do it to the governor and the Oregon Congressional Delegation and the Coastal Caucus if we felt like it. I think the Coastal Caucus is most connected with us and really should hear our thanks and support for their letter advocating for Corps of Engineers funding as part of the Corps' fiscal year 19 work plan. And, we just have to keep fighting for those funds. And the caucus has been very actively doing that. And so I can draft a letter up saying thank you from the commission as well for that. And for sure, signature if you want to, if you'd like to do that. Or
I think it'd be more than appropriate. Does anybody have any issues with that?
No, that's great.
The only other thing I wanted to emphasize is this is our first shot at, which I think was a great idea from Jeff, that we do a little spreadsheet that shows all of our major activities from capital projects to the administrative projects to maintenance and repair projects. We just sort of show over the course of the fiscal year what kind of, where our time is spent on these big pieces. My proposal would be that we update this quarterly and bring it to you, and if there's questions about why did this shift or whatever, we can talk about it at the meeting on a quarterly basis. But this is sort of a working document, and we will continue. And as the year comes up, Aaron just spoke about a couple of things that may be new maintenance and repair projects that we didn't have planned, but money shifts around and things happen during the course of a year that sometimes projects come up and we have to do them, so we don't do something else. So we would add things as we move along. But this is just for your reference, and if you have any questions or thoughts about it, I'm happy to answer, or you can shoot me an email.
You did not skimp on colorful.
Is in color pretty. Color is important.
Yeah, yellow, green.
Oh, I was going to say, if we can get this electronically.
Yes, I'd
Yeah.
love to send it to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah, was this in line with what you were thinking?
Perfect. Simple, thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I hope it's all you all can do too.
Yeah.
I think it's helpful for the rest of the team to see this, and we haven't shared it broadly because we just sort of got this together, but I think it'll be helpful. As I go through the staff meetings, it will be nice to share with them. What is everybody doing? So, yeah, I think it's
Small bit of feedback. You might think about putting a date on the bottom of this of when you did it.
I was going to do that. Thank
Just
you.
so that
I will do
if
that.
we look at it and it changes, you can say, hey, back in da-da-da-da. Here's
Yes,
this copy.
I intend to do that. Thank you for reminding me.
What is the exact date?
Today's date?
23rd.
It's just today's 23.
I was been cutting and pasting and
I'm a little blurry. So.
brush off the printer.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Terry?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next item on the agenda, and appreciate everybody for hanging in there. We're almost through here. Commissioner reports and comments. Commissioners have anything to update us on, or thoughts, comments, concerns that they'd like to bring up at this time? Good. Good.
We have 10 minutes, 20 minutes, what's the limit?
You can take all the time you'd like.
45 minutes.
I joke.
I haven't had a 45-minute PowerPoint ready to go. Getting excited. Anybody else? I will mention that Sarah and I and Terry did meet with Dave Gomberg briefly last week. We talked about a number of different issues, how the court was going, the progression of what we're doing. David expressed some encouragement about how things were, that it seemed that what we were talking about at the meeting seemed positive, to motivate the court moving sort of forward with projects and some hires, as well as the board being complete. We have seated all of our members, if you will. Terry's doing well in reaching out to our various different political partners. So I think overall the meeting was positive. Sarah, did you have anything else you want to add?
And, they were left in the dark really, and so we're going to up our game on communication with everybody, of course, including the Coastal Caucus. And that was kind of a rub with them, that we haven't heard from you guys in a year, what's going on? And so it leads everyone to come up with things that we've been doing or not doing, and I think that's across the board, our hometown, Coastal Caucus, everybody. And one thing I thought was interesting that David Gombrich said, don't hesitate thinking Oregonian, the Port of Newport is a really important player in this state. And it did help me realize that it's not just our port, it's the state's port. Not in a way that is negative, but it is a big deal. We're a big deal.
It's integral to the economy of the community, the county, and the state.
Correct. You reiterated that.
And it is a good point. We were talking a little bit about the idea of creating a summary, like a one-page, maybe brief statement and some bullet points about what the port's been doing, what we discussed at our regularly scheduled commission meetings, and then sending that out to local media as well as the Coastal Caucus, just as a summary that says, hey, here's what we're doing, at least to initially address what you're talking about.
And then we can face-to-face after the election and all of their committees are back put together and start doing maybe some more face-to-face with the caucus.
So again, we should all work with Terry on this initial one-pager that we'll send out. But again, this will be something that just allows, and again, we'll put it on our website as well, but at least we can more actively farm this out to folks that are interested in your goings on the report, and it gives them an opportunity to follow up with us as they need to, or follow up with the meeting packets or anything else if they want additional information about what was going on specifically at the meeting, let alone the rest of the report.
We found out they don't read all of our minutes.
I know, that was a shock, wasn't it?
It was very shocking.
Yeah, it almost hurt. Anyway, that was the only update I had. Again, I appreciate everybody hanging in here. We have the calendar and future considerations. Everybody can read these here. I want to make sure that we highlight a couple things: the strategic business plan and kickoff meetings, the regularly scheduled commission meetings, one on the 27th of November, one on the 18th of December. I think those matched up as best we could with the Google polls that were out. Again, folks can read the details of the calendar and future consideration. Anybody want to highlight anything else on that? You can read it in the packets. All right. Moving on here, we have one more opportunity for public comments. Again, if you'd like to make a comment, state your name, and don't comment on the length of the meeting. Go ahead.
Jim Shaw, I want to apologize for the Yuga interruption to your meeting, to both the commission and the staff. I forgot to turn my phone on. Maybe like a dummy, I'll learn someday to do that. Thank you.
Is that a recording of your truck's
Similar, yeah.
All right, any other public comments? Okay, nothing heard at this point. I would like to adjourn our meeting at 8:38. Thank you all for asking.